Good. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for showing up. Look, I thought I'd just start off with giving a bit of context for the announcement today. It is part of the ACT National Coalition Agreement that we are reforming health and safety. We had our first announcement yesterday on the small business carve-out and a policy on reducing the sea of road cones around New Zealand. Part of what we're doing is having a tranche of policy reforms coming out this week, but we'll have months of health and safety reform. Today I wanted to focus on the issue of land access. We know, having been around the country from Whangarei to Bluff, talking to people, that there is a real fear and uncertainty from people who own or manage access to land around New Zealand, a fear of prosecution, of who will be facing the liability if things go wrong. And what I'm wanting to do is clarify once and for all that under the Health and Safety at Work Act, landowners, people who manage and access land, will not be legally liable just because somebody wants to use their land for recreational activity. And I want to thank all of those Kiwis who did come out as part of our roadshow and gave really open, fulsome discussion. You know, I had some fantastic conversations, for example, with Te Arawa, who have large ownership holdings in the Rotorua area, who did display their fear of prosecution for if things go wrong, who are very thankful that we are clarifying this law for them, and I'm sure lots of iwi up and down New Zealand. There are also concerns that I heard from people like the Federated Mountain Clubs, the Fish and Game Council, and Federated Farmers. We know people want to have access to land for hiking, kayaking, tramping, fishing, deer hunting even, who are finding that the access to New Zealand's outdoor recreational areas is being reduced and eroded due to fear. And so that's what we're here to clarify, but I'm happy to take any of your questions.
It's unfounded fears, aren't they? If the carding case was clear, the landowners are not at fault. So why does the Parliament need to be involved?
Well, I don't think the law is clear, because if it was clear, WorkSafe wouldn't have decided to prosecute the landowners in the Whakaari situation. What I had heard is that because of the decision to prosecute the landowners at Whakaari, landowners up and down New Zealand, because of that decision, have been pulling back land access and have been very fearful of their own prosecution. I'm not going to go into details specifically about the Whakaari decision, but we do know we need to clarify the law for every other landowner up and down New Zealand, that they shouldn't be fearful of recreational access.
Was that Whakaari case a bit of a turning point? You said it led to some landowners restricting access. Have you heard that was a bit of a prompt in some action?
The decision to prosecute by WorkSafe the owners of Whakaari White Island, I've heard, has led to a ripple of fear up and down New Zealand from landowners who have been pulling back access for recreational purposes. What I'm hoping to do is clarify the law that people who simply manage land or own land will not be at fear of prosecution, because Kiwis want to enjoy the great outdoors.
Under your clarification, those landowners of Whakaari wouldn't be able to be prosecuted?
That is my understanding, but like I say, I don't want to go into WorkSafe's decisions to or not to prosecute, but what I want to have happen is that all Kiwis will have access to our great outdoors. Many Kiwis grew up going hiking, kayaking, fishing, even deer hunting. And we've heard from individuals that that access to land has been eroded because of fear of the landowners of prosecution. I would like all Kiwis to grow up in this great nation knowing that they can have access to our outdoors.
So it's the operators of the activities who will be liable in this, under this change. How does that apply to individuals going out hunting? Would it be them that is liable for any kind of dangerous activities?
That's right. So under the laws, anyone who is an individual that wants to access private land or public land will be responsible for themselves. We want to bring a bit of common sense back into New Zealand. But it will, of course, be the case that you can't just go onto people's land without asking for access on that private land to start with.
So if I was, say, a motel owner or just a person on private land, and I had a swimming pool, perhaps I didn't maintain the fence around that properly, a guest, or just somebody from the neighbourhood wandered in, a young child drowned in the pool, would the owner of that swimming pool be responsible in any circumstances for that?
That's a really good question, and I can come back to you with specifics about motel owners and those sorts of situations. What I'm wanting to make clear today is the overarching principle that landowners should not be fearful of prosecution. In the case of someone who owns a motel, for example, that they're managing and operating, I would expect that's a different situation to just someone who owns the land. You know, if the motel, for example, was on land that was owned by somebody else, I wouldn't be expecting the landowner to be aware of the day-to-day activities and monitoring the health and safety obligations of the motel manager.
Okay, if it was not somebody who was a guest, it was just somebody, a kid from down the street who wandered in, they're just accessing private land, I guess they face that risk, a disaster happened. Have you thought through those sort of situations?
Yeah, not in that specific circumstance, but what I have thought through are the consequences, for example, of iwi, who have told us quite openly that because they are custodians of their land, they want people to have access to the land, even where it may be that there is geothermal activity. We don't want people closing off access to their privately held land. But in those cases, there might be whānau, there might be people who historically through generations have used or accessed swimming pool areas that are naturally forming. We're saying that's okay. People can enter at their own risks.
This is one of the few changes, I guess, in health and safety responsibility following on from the announcement yesterday for small businesses. ACC currently has a deficit of about $7 billion. Have you had any advice on the financial implications for ACC of the changes that you announced yesterday, today, others in the pipeline? Are you getting information on the potential cost of compensating people for deaths and injuries that may result from this?
I would expect that under our law changes, we will actually see better health and safety outcomes across New Zealand. The move to focus on critical risks as the priority will see more businesses and workers focusing on those issues that will actually cause death, serious injury and illness, and not sweating the small stuff like putting up signs saying caution, there's hot water, or caution, this is a closed door, which I understand we have signs at Parliament that say caution, this door may open. That's getting a little excessive. We need to bring back a bit of common sense. But for ACC, what I have received is a commitment through Cabinet that I will work with the ACC Minister on the overlap between ACC and the health and safety system. Because you're right, the health and safety system doesn't work in isolation. Under New Zealand law, we do have access to accident compensation, and I'm very hopeful that we can get the balance between those two systems working together.
In the
The
situation,
leader made the point yesterday in response to your announcements that every 15 minutes someone is so seriously injured in New Zealand at work that they're off work for a week. Do we really have the room to be taking away regulations in New Zealand?
Look, I see this less about taking away regulation and actually focusing people on those areas of critical risk. What I've heard loud and clear from small business owners is that they are very stressed. They are dealing with regulations every single day, but they need to know what they need to do to comply with the law. We've got people who are losing sleep wondering if they'll be prosecuted over small paperwork issues, rather than focusing on, are we doing anything at work that could cause death? What are the activities that could cause serious injury, and how do we manage those? Making it really specific that that's what we need to focus on, I believe will actually lead to fewer serious injuries at work.
Given you're clarifying for landowners what the rules are here, what does this mean legislation-wise? Do you actually have to tweak something there, given this the clarification?
Yes, this will be a legislative change. I will be taking a bill through Cabinet and hoping to get that done by the end of this term, hopefully by the start of next year, but I can't guarantee anything on the legislative agenda, but we will be having a bill for legislative change.
In the circumstance you spoke about before with iwi, who may have, geothermal areas in their land, would it still be their responsibility to kind of have warning signs about that if there's kind of dangerous areas of the land?
Look, I think it's impossible to try and preempt every situation, and that's what we're bringing this law back to, that we're expecting common sense. Where people enter privately held land, they should be doing so at their own risk. But I would also accept that if people are, for example, asking a farmer if they can have access to their stream to go fishing, that the farmer is going to say, yes, I would hope so, but they could also say no. But if they do say yes, they would let them know about the critical risks that they may face. But it will be the individual's responsibility to look out for themselves. That's what I would expect for anybody doing outdoor pursuits. There is an element of risk when it comes to even mountain biking for yourself. You know that there is a potential that you could fall over and break your leg, but it's a risk that you're willing to take. We need to be, as a country, less about wrapping people up in cotton wool and allowing more people to have resilience and common sense. But importantly, we want people to grow up having a great Kiwi upbringing, which means access to the land.
But there wouldn't be any requirement to have any kind of warning around any of those kind of dangerous aspects of the land itself?
No, unless that is being used for specific operational purposes. Not just the landowner, but you're actually using and maintaining that land for a commercial purpose.
Those are a good example. It is an unusual feature that poses danger. Many visitors to New Zealand may not understand the danger that they see in public parks and Rotorua. Mm-hmm. You think there should be no obligation on the council to warn people about that?
I think we need a little bit more common sense back in New Zealand. It is actually frustrating how many signs you see about caution. There is a door that could open. Caution, there is a staircase here. Caution, there's hot water. We need to allow people to have a good upbringing where you're also not wrapping people in cotton wool. But I also wouldn't be expecting tourists just to enter people's privately held land without asking for permission first. Like any New Zealander, I would expect them to ask permission first.
By the Department of Conservation and by the councils, because they're also mentioned in the press release. Is there an obligation here to warn when there is an unusually dangerous feature like hot water?
When it comes to the custodians of the land, for example, the Department of Conservation will be working through details of how we manage the access to land. But where it is a commercial venture, there of course will be those focus on the critical risks, and I would expect that to happen. But I wouldn't expect, for example, that a farmer is needing to go through their privately held land and putting up posts and signs everywhere just because somebody wants to visit their stream.
If the farmer was asking for payment in return for access to the land, would that be considered a commercial venture?
I suspect it would. But we'd probably need to clarify that under the law, but that would be for a commercial purpose. I'm not aware of people doing that, though. Yeah.
Does this change the current building of pools legislation? Will this impact the regulation covering pools and water features?
That's not a detail that we have worked through yet, but I'm very happy to go away and look at that specific circumstance.
And does it cover the land itself, or does it cover buildings and structures?
This is specifically for land ownership rather than any building ownership. What we've heard is that, for example, from the Deerstalkers Association, the Federation of Mountain Clubs, the Fish and Game Council and Te Arawa, that people are fearful of allowing people onto their land just because they own it. Not because they manage or operate anything on it, but just because they're fearful of the potential of prosecution because they own the land. And we want people to allow Kiwis to have access to the great outdoors. Cool.
How many people get prosecuted? Has that happened except for whakaaro, or is it very rare?
The only example that I've had going through the road shows was that this is born out of the decision to prosecute at Whakaari White Island that has caused this ripple of fear across the country. And what I want to do, putting in black and white, is tell every landowner, every custodian, every manager of land, you do not need to fear people using your land for recreational purposes. We want people to access New Zealand. Cool. Thanks very much. Cool. Thanks, team.